Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm a little surprised why I'm here, but I'm absolutely delighted and honoured to be here. You will have heard from the generous introduction that I suppose I'm a curator, that's how I would describe myself, and I'm delighted. I'm slightly disturbed to see that being a curator tends to be one of the most desirable ambitions, particularly amongst women in the world today. But the word tends to be applied to all sorts of things. I was really, you can understand it being applied to people who look after museum collections and who curate exhibitions. But I've recently seen it being applied to music festivals, which I suppose is progression, to CDs, a curated CD, and a knitwear collection. A curated knitwear collection. I suppose it's a word that's difficult to define, but what I think of myself as doing is really guiding ideas, putting together ideas and audiences, and guiding people through the space between. The space between, in the terms of the arts, as a mediator between audiences and ideas, is a very interesting arena. It can be well-worn and overlooked, it can be abandoned, it can be uncharted, it can be dangerous, it can be full of hidden treasure, as anyone who's ever dived down between the fridge and the cooker has ever found out. And you sometimes, it's often the road less traveled. You sometimes need a guide, you sometimes need a machete. You can leap and hope there's a net, as previous speakers have said. You may have to build a bridge. It can be expansive and huge, and it can be very restricted. But sometimes, a lot of those who work in the creative arts and the creative industries will know that less is more, and sometimes the best ideas can come from very narrow spaces between. Up on the screen there, you'll see an image by Belfast's very own Paul Seawright, Professor of Photography at the University of Ulster, of the city of Lagos. And he's particularly interested in the spaces between the forgotten rooms, the abandoned buildings, the uncompleted car parks, the life that goes on under bridges that we're all travelling over. And I would say very much in my own life, I would be like that. I'm really interested in going where there's no path. As my poor children will attest, as they often come back having struggled through wind bushes and nettles because I've insisted that there's a much better way to go this way, even though this one's safely signposted. And I should say, in answer to the question that Jenny was objecting to, and which I object to constantly, is I always tell them, people who ask, that my children are being raised by wolves, which not only shuts them up, but is actually... It actually is more or less true, but then it never did Mowgli any harm. And look at Romulus and Remus, I keep telling them. Anyway, I've just actually curated a show called Outside and Between. I'm very interested in people who don't fit specific categories, and I'm also very interested in bridging gaps between people who have ideas which may seem to belong to the realm of science and academia, and people who have artistic and creative ideas across all art forms, and the widest possible audience. This is my first slide. I know where I'm going, and we've heard from people about having a plan, and I'm often asked how I got to have the job that I did, which is a very desirable job. I'm very lucky. I never know when a weekend is. I love my job. I love what I do so much that I'm not conscious of the distinction between home life and work. I'm thinking about my job at home, and sometimes the other way around, if I remember. It can be detrimental and it needs balance, but I've been lucky enough to have a so-called career which has allowed me to do what I enjoy doing and to exploit what little talent I have to the best. And when I was at school, I used to sit next to a girl called Jennifer Young. We used to sit in alphabetical order in the school for girls that I went to in England. My name then was Tuckley, and we sat next to each other. And she knew, the first day I ever set eyes on her, we sat together, and she asked me what I wanted to be when I left school. And I was 11, and I had no idea. I didn't even know where the toilets were. and she said she was going to be a dentist, and we sat together the first term of every year thereon, and in fact she became a dentist, and a very successful dentist, and although I haven't been in touch with her for about 30 years, I'm sure she's still a very successful dentist. At the time that I knew her, I went from wanting to be a show jumper, to being a spy, to being a psychiatrist. Thank God for all those professions that I never was successful in any of those areas. And I'm offered that. So when I come to being asked how I got there, the answer really is I don't know. I started off doing languages. I was terrible at university when I first went there. I dropped out and went to work at the age of 19 in the real world because I hated my course. And then I decided that I'd like to be an art historian, and I applied to the Courtauld Institute, which is a very prestigious institute for art historians in London, and I didn't apply anywhere else, only to one place. I knew I wanted to go there. They saw the application, these very serious people. In fact, Sir Anthony Blunt, who was a famous spy, was on the interview panel, and he said to me, this is a bit of a high-risk way of applying to university. What happens if we don't take you? And I basically said, well, if I don't get in here, I don't want to go anywhere. So I didn't. And I did get in, and they let me in, and I was there. Anyway, I know where I'm going. If anyone has not seen it, it's one of the best films by Powell and Pressburger about a girl who thinks she knows where she's going, but on the way, lots of things happen, and something else intervenes in her life, and all the things that she thought she wanted, she finds out aren't important at all. If you haven't seen it, I recommend it. And as a result of not knowing where you're going, all sorts of wonderful accidents can happen, which anyone involved in the creative arts will tell you is where real creativity, real humanity, connection with life happens, in the accidents, in the things that you thought you were setting out to do and then don't really happen. The other thing I wanted to mention was plate tectonics. I happened to be in a hospital during my geography A-level curriculum for a few weeks when they discussed plate tectonics. I've never found out what they are, and for a long time it really worried me. But the thing is that I've learned that you should surround yourself with people who know more than you about things you don't really need to know about. So, for instance, this is a wonderful piece of sculpture by an artist called Mark Didou. I have no idea how he made it. It's based on MRI scans. I have no idea how they work. They turn miraculously through anamorphic mirrors into skulls. You can see up here. I have no idea how it happens, but I'm surrounded by people who do. And my job is to mediate what they do, all of their skills, all of the wonder, all of the knowledge they have to the widest possible audience. The other thing I want to talk to you about is bat language. This is my friend Jennifer and I had this term bat language. If you get a lot of women in the room together, maybe at a dinner party and there are men there, but if the men go out for a reason, leave the room, by the time they come back, most women will have ascertained the complete sexual and gynecological history of each other, their romantic history and everything else. So the men come back and wonder how on earth people have known each other for only 5 minutes, got to know this. I think it's a particularly feminine trait that we should all capitalize on. It means honing in on things that matter to people and finding ways of making them happen and sharing a common language. This was a recent project we did with South African artists that did that, just that. The other thing is sharing vocabulary. It's really important to share vocabulary. You may get people from across audiences, between audiences and academics. Academics know a lot about, who have great ideas, know a lot about the world, they know a lot about their subject, but can be very scared about sharing that with other people through another medium because they feel they're going to make fools of themselves. And similarly, audiences feel that they aren't allowed to access high art because it's not for them. So a lot of what we try and do is to find a shared vocabulary. This is an alphabet we developed with the Travellers community as part of a project with the Equality Commission. And you'll see that they actually, with the help of Oliver Jeffers, the well-known children's illustrator and book writer, author, came up with a dictionary of their own culture. We also work with lots of other marginalized communities to do this. Mutual benefit is another thing. If we can find a way of working together through shared goals, learning languages and each other's languages to share information, then mutual benefit means that we can tap into all the opportunities to get something on course. This is a wonderful photograph of a flower that Helena Schmidt, a Swedish artist, made, which we did as a project which involved everyone from the Linnean Society in London to the Swedish Embassy to IKEA. And I finally got to end with alternate title, Context is Everything. Alternate title is one of my favorite records. It's called, it was originally released as Randy Scouse Git by the Monkees, one of the best bands in the world. For those of you who are too young to remember the Monkees, I suggest you go and listen to it on YouTube. I did actually give up listening to recorded music about 5 years ago because I was so fed up with the listening always to the same things over and over again, so I don't actually listen to recorded music. But yesterday, I listened to it on YouTube, and this, I think, are some of the most profound lyrics of all time. They actually express what all artists need mediators to talk about. All artists, all academics, all need a mediator to get out to the widest possible audience. Why don't you see it the way that I see it? And they can't often accept that people don't see it the way they see it, but with a bit of help from people like me, maybe they can. Thank you.